Hey everyone! Today we are digging into one of the most famous buildings on the entire planet, the White House. But I guarantee you, the story you think you know, well, it's only half the picture. So let's get right into it. We've all seen this picture, right? It's an image of power, of permanence. You see it on the news, in movies. It just seems as solid and unchanging as the country it represents. But what if it's not? What if, underneath that pristine white paint, this building is actually a story of fierce arguments, constant reinvention, and frankly, some wild dreams that never even got off the ground? Because that's exactly what it is. And that story, you guessed it, starts right at the very beginning. The very first argument was about what the president's house should even be. So, right off the bat, you've got these two totally different ideas clashing. On one side, you have Pierre L'Enfant, the guy designing all of Washington, D.C. He wanted a massive president's palace. I mean, something 4 times the size of what we have now, a real statement piece. But on the other side, you had this Irish architect, James Hoban, who pictured something more like a graceful country home. And honestly, practicality was a huge issue. They were worried they literally didn't have enough stone to build L'Enfant's giant palace and the Capitol building. Well, this didn't end well for L'Enfant. He just refused to cooperate with the city commissioners, and he was eventually dismissed. That's when President Washington himself stepped in, looked over all the designs from a national competition, and personally handpicked Hoban's more modest and, let's face it, more achievable vision. Okay, so the designs picked, construction can start. But this brings us to a really fundamental and often glossed over part of the story. Who actually put the stones in place? Who raised these walls? And look, this isn't some historical theory. This is a direct quote from the National Archives. It's a documented, undeniable fact. The physical construction of these incredible symbols of freedom was carried out by people who were anything but free. So why did this happen? Well, the historical records are pretty clear. The commissioners who were in charge of building the new capital city, they tried to get laborers from Europe, from other parts of America, but they just couldn't find enough people. So they turned to the institution of slavery and began leasing enslaved African Americans from their owners to do the hard labor. And this number, it's just chillingly specific. If you go to the National Archives, you can find the payrolls from between 1795 and 1800. And on those records, they list 122 names under the column heading Negro Hire for their work on both the Capitol and what would become the White House. And we need to be clear, these weren't just men doing grunt work. Sure, many were hauling heavy materials, but others were highly skilled craftsmen, carpenters, bricklayers, stonecutters. A 1795 payroll actually called the carpenter's roll lists them by name: Tom, Peter, Ben, and Harry. And this is the part that's just so vital to understand. The wages listed next to their names, that money didn't go to them. It was paid directly to the slave owners who had leased them out for the work. So we have the design, and we have the builders. You might think, okay, the White House was built, story's over. But that is not even close to the truth. The reality is, this building has basically been under construction ever since. I mean, just think about what this building has been through. In 1814, the British burned it to a hollow shell. They had to bring back the original architect, James Hoban, just to rebuild it. Then, in 1902, Teddy Roosevelt completely changes its function, kicking the offices out into the brand new West Wing. And then came the big one. By the time Harry Truman was president in the late 1940s, the building was literally falling apart. I mean, his own daughter's piano leg fell right through the floorboards of her room. So they did something that sounds insane. They completely gutted it. They took everything out, the floors, the interior walls, all of it. All that was left standing were the original outer stone walls. The White House we know today was basically rebuilt from the inside out. And it's not just the building itself that's changed. Even the name is kind of new. For the first 100 years or so, everyone just called it the President's House or the President's Palace. It wasn't until 1901 that Teddy Roosevelt made the White House its official name. But all of those changes, they happened to the building itself. Maybe the most mind-blowing idea of all was a plan for its surroundings, a vision for Washington, D.C. that would have changed everything. Yeah, this is the story of a ghost plan, a jaw-dropping vision of what could have been. Okay, get this. In 1932, a guy named William T. Partridge pushed this incredibly daring plan. The idea? To flood a giant chunk of the National Mall, creating this massive reservoir. Can you even picture that? Instead of those huge green lawns stretching out, you would have had a landscape of canals and waterfronts, almost like Venice, right there in the middle of Washington, D.C. And the crazy thing is, this was a serious proposal. They even built a model of it. And while it obviously never happened, this ghost plan is just this powerful reminder that the iconic city we see today wasn't a sure thing. It was just one possible future among a bunch of competing dreams. So when you put it all together, the unseen story of the White House is so much more complicated and honestly more interesting than that simple static image. It's a story of L'Enfant's palace versus Hoban's house. It's a story built on the forgotten labor of enslaved men. It's a story of fire and total reconstruction. And it's a story haunted by these ghosts of what might have been, like a city of canals. So I think the big takeaway here is this. The White House isn't finished. It never has been. It's not some museum that's sealed behind glass. It's a living, breathing document, a place where our history is still being written and rewritten and rebuilt. Which kind of leaves us with one last question to chew on. Knowing that even our most solid-looking symbols have these incredibly complex, hidden stories of conflict and change, what landmark, maybe in your own city or somewhere else in the world, are you going to see a little differently now?